It started as a normal moment. Jason Statham was on a private training floor, no cameras, no interviews. Just sweat, focus, and confidence. The kind of confidence that comes when you've played the toughest men on screen for years. A few crew members stood nearby, watching him work the heavy bag. Someone casually brought up a name. "Have you ever met Chuck Norris?" Jason smirked. He wiped his hands and said, half joking, half serious, "I respect him, but let's be real. That was a different era." The room went quiet. Jason continued, "Movies today are different. Training is different. Fighters are different." A few people laughed nervously. One man didn't. A quiet voice from the back said, "Careful what you say about Chuck." Jason turned, still confident. "I'm not scared of legends." That's when the door behind him opened, and someone walked in, calm, silent, unbothered. Jason hadn't realized yet. The challenge he just made was about to reach the wrong person. What happened next would completely change Jason Statham's expression. The room didn't feel the same anymore. Jason Statham stood there, still relaxed on the surface, but something had shifted. The laughter from a moment ago died instantly. No one spoke, no one even moved. That one name had changed everything. Chuck Norris. Jason noticed it too. The way a few crew members avoided eye contact. The way one guy quietly put his phone back in his pocket, like he suddenly remembered where he was. Jason chuckled lightly. "What? Did I say something wrong?" No answer. Someone finally said almost under their breath, "He's not just a movie guy." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Neither am I." He wasn't trying to be arrogant. At least that's how he saw it. Jason had trained for years. Real boxing, real martial arts, real discipline. He'd taken hits. He'd pushed his body. He wasn't just pretending on screen. That's what made him confident. "Look," Jason continued, pacing slowly, "I respect Chuck. Truly. But people confuse reputation with reality." A few heads turned away. Jason didn't notice or didn't care. "In movies," he said, "anyone can look unstoppable. But real skill, that's different." The silence grew heavier. One of the older trainers finally spoke up. "You don't challenge a man like Chuck. Not because he'll hurt you, but because he doesn't need to prove anything." Jason smiled. "Neither do I." That was the problem. Ego had entered the room, quietly, politely but firmly. Someone else tried to lighten the mood. "This is getting serious. Let's just train." Jason nodded but added one more line, almost casually. "If Chuck were here right now, I'd say the same thing." That sentence landed hard. A few people exchanged looks. Because Chuck was close. Jason didn't know that yet. He went back to warming up, shadowboxing with sharp, precise movements. Every punch looked clean, controlled, powerful. This was his world, speed, aggression, confidence. The crew watched, unsure whether to be impressed or uncomfortable. One man whispered to another, "He really doesn't know." Jason overheard that. "Know what?" he asked. No reply. That's when the door behind them made a soft sound, not a slam, not a dramatic entrance, just a calm, ordinary door opening. Jason kept moving, unaware. The man who entered didn't announce himself. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even step forward right away. He just stood there, watching. The room froze. Every single person recognized him instantly. Jason felt it, not through sight, but through energy. The kind of energy that makes a room go quiet without explanation. He stopped mid-movement and turned around. And for the first time, Jason Statham hesitated. The man standing there wasn't big, wasn't loud, wasn't aggressive, but his presence was heavy, calm, controlled, unshaken. Jason's smile faded just slightly. "Didn't mean to interrupt," the man said gently. "It was Chuck Norris. No introduction needed." Jason nodded respectfully. "Didn't know you were around?" Chuck smiled, not mocking, not offended, just calm. "I heard my name." The air felt tight now. Jason laughed lightly, trying to keep control of the moment. "Hope it wasn't a problem." Chuck tilted his head. "Depends." That one word carried more weight than shouting ever could. Jason crossed his arms. "I was just saying times have changed." Chuck nodded. "They always do." Jason felt eyes on him from every direction. This wasn't a joke anymore. This wasn't a casual comment. This was a moment. Jason straightened his posture. "Well, nothing wrong with a friendly challenge, right?" Chuck didn't answer immediately. He took a step forward. Not aggressive, not threatening. "Just close enough." "You sure about that?" Chuck asked quietly. The confidence in Jason's face flickered just for a second, and everyone saw it. Engagement break. Agar app is moment mean hot kai kart. Jason ki jaga hot to challenge continue kartia respect dika kar rukjate. Comments mean lecco, Jason swallowed, because deep down, even he was starting to realize, this might not have been a good idea. Chuck does one simple thing, and the entire room instantly goes silent. The room didn't breathe, no one spoke, no one moved. Even the sound of the gym equipment seemed to fade into the background. All eyes were locked on the two men standing just a few feet apart. Jason Statham, Chuck Norris. Two worlds meeting in the same space. Jason was the first to break the silence. "Well," he said with a half smile, trying to keep the moment light, "since you're here, I hope you didn't take anything personally." Chuck Norris looked at him calmly. "Words don't bother me," he replied. "Intent does." That response landed harder than Jason expected. Jason shifted his stance slightly, not aggressive, just instinct. Years of training kicking in without him even thinking about it. Chuck noticed. "So," Chuck continued, his voice steady, "you believe things are different now?" Jason nodded. "Training has evolved. Fighters have evolved. What worked back then doesn't always work today." A few people in the room swallowed hard. Chuck nodded slowly, as if considering the idea. "That may be true," he said. "But discipline doesn't age, control doesn't age, and respect," he paused, "shouldn't either." Jason felt the pressure rising. This wasn't a debate anymore. This was a quiet test, and he knew everyone in the room could feel it. "I wasn't trying to disrespect you," Jason said. "Just being honest." Chuck took one slow step forward, not threatening, not challenging, just closer. "Honesty without humility," Chuck said, "often sounds like arrogance." That stung. Jason exhaled sharply through his nose. "Are you saying I'm arrogant?" Chuck didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around the room, at the trainers, the crew, the people holding their phones but not daring to record openly. Then he looked back at Jason. "I'm saying," Chuck replied, "that confidence doesn't need to announce itself." The room went completely silent. Jason crossed his arms, then uncrossed them. He didn't want to back down, not here, not now. His reputation, his image was on the line. "Well," Jason said, choosing his words carefully, "confidence also doesn't need to hide." A murmur rippled through the room. Chuck smiled slightly, not amused, not offended, just observant. "Fair enough," he said. He gestured lightly toward the open space in the center of the gym. "No audience," Chuck added. "No camera." Jason hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. That hesitation didn't go unnoticed. One of the trainers quietly whispered, "Jason, you don't have to." Jason raised a hand. "I'm good." He stepped forward into the open space. The tension was now thick enough to feel. Chuck followed, moving with an ease that didn't match his age. No warm-up, no stretching, just calm readiness. Jason rolled his shoulders, bouncing lightly on his feet. This was familiar territory for him. Movement, speed, precision. Chuck stood still, hands relaxed, posture upright, waiting. "You sure about this?" Jason asked. Chuck met his eyes. "I've been sure for a long time." Jason nodded. "All right. Just a friendly demonstration." Chuck tilted his head. Demonstrations reveal more than fights ever do. That sentence echoed in Jason's mind. They circled each other slowly. No music, no countdown, no referee. Just two men reading each other. Jason feinted, quick, sharp, testing reflexes. Chuck didn't move. Jason stepped back, slightly confused. He tried again. Faster this time. Still nothing. Chuck's eyes never left Jason's centerline. Jason frowned. "You're not even going to try." Chuck replied calmly, "I already am." That's when Jason felt it, not fear, something worse, uncertainty. He lunged forward, controlled but fast, aiming to prove a point. And in that instant, the entire room leaned forward. Because everyone sensed it at the same time, Jason had just crossed from confidence into challenge, and Chuck Norris was about to respond. At this moment, who do you think has the advantage, speed or experience? Comment speed or EXP below. Jason moved. Chuck moved too, but not the way anyone expected. In the next part, Chuck makes one small move, and Jason instantly realizes the difference between acting tough and being tough. Jason moved first, fast, precise. Controlled. It wasn't reckless. It was a calculated step forward, a sharp feint meant to draw a reaction. In Jason's world, speed created openings. Pressure forced mistakes. Chuck Norris didn't retreat. He didn't block. He didn't flinch. Instead, he adjusted his stance. Barely one foot shifted a few inches. His shoulders relaxed. His weight settled. Jason didn't even realize what had changed. He advanced again, this time committing just enough to test Chuck's timing. That's when it happened. Not a strike, not a grab, not a takedown. Chuck stepped inside Jason's movement. It was so smooth that half the room missed it. Jason suddenly felt his balance disappear, not violently, not painfully, just gone. His forward momentum stopped cold. Before Jason could react, Chuck's hand was already resting lightly against his chest, not pushing, not threatening. "Just theirs," Chuck said calmly. Jason froze. The room gasped. Jason looked down. Chuck's other hand hovered inches from Jason's shoulder, perfectly positioned. No tension, no strain. Jason realized something terrifying. If Chuck wanted to move him, he already could have. The room stayed silent as Jason slowly stepped back. He didn't smile now, he didn't joke. He nodded once. "All right," Jason said quietly. "I felt that." Chuck stepped back too, giving space. "That," Chuck replied, "was control." Jason exhaled, processing what had just happened. He tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out weaker than he expected. "You didn't even hit me." Chuck nodded. "Because I didn't need to." That sentence landed harder than any punch could have. Jason reset his stance, this time more cautious. Slower, less aggressive. He tried again, a wider angle, more movement, testing range instead of speed. Chuck mirrored him effortlessly, always one step ahead, always balanced. Jason struck, fast, clean, restrained. Chuck redirected it with a simple turn of the wrist. No force, no struggle. Jason felt his arm guided away like it belonged to someone else. The room murmured. Jason pulled back, eyes sharp now. "You're reading me." Chuck replied, "I'm listening to you." Jason didn't understand. "My breathing," Chuck explained calmly. "Your shoulders, your weight shift, you announce everything." Jason swallowed. That was true. He had trained for performance. For the camera, for choreography, for timing that looked powerful. Chuck had trained for reality. Jason tried one last time, controlled, respectful, but determined. Chuck stepped aside and lightly tapped Jason's shoulder. That was it. But Jason stumbled. Not because he was pushed. Because he wasn't centered. He caught himself quickly, but the message was clear. The difference was undeniable now. Jason stepped back fully and raised his hands, not in defense, but in surrender. "Okay," he said. "That's enough." The room finally breathed again. Chuck lowered his hands and nodded. "Smart choice," he said. "Strength isn't proven by winning. It's proven by knowing when you've learned." Jason stood there for a moment, chest rising and falling. Then he smiled, this time genuinely. "I thought speed was everything," Jason admitted. "I was wrong." Chuck smiled back slightly. "Speed fades. Fundamentals stay." No one clapped. No one cheered. They didn't need to. Everyone in that room had just witnessed something rare. A quiet transfer of power. Not through violence, but through mastery. Jason extended his hand. Chuck shook it, firm, respectful, equal. Jason turned to the room. "He's not a legend because of movies," he said. "He's a legend because of discipline." Chuck said nothing. He didn't need to. What matters more in real life, raw power or control? Comment power or command role? Jason walked off the mat slower than he walked onto it. Not weaker, smarter, and everyone knew. The challenge was over. The lesson had just begun. Jason says something that surprises everyone, including Chuck Norris. The room stayed quiet long after they stepped apart. No one rushed to speak. No one cracked a joke. It felt wrong to break the moment too quickly, like everyone understood they had just witnessed something real, something that didn't happen often. Jason Statham stood near the edge of the mat, hands resting on his hips. His breathing had slowed, but his mind hadn't. He replayed the exchange again and again. No punches landed, no throws, no pain. Yet somehow he felt more exposed than he ever had during a fight scene. Chuck Norris adjusted his jacket calmly, like nothing unusual had happened. The contrast was striking. Jason looked like someone who had just learned something uncomfortable about himself. Jason finally broke the silence. "You know what surprised me the most?" he said. Chuck looked at him. "What's that?" Jason shook his head slightly. "I didn't feel overpowered." That caught everyone's attention. Jason continued, choosing his words carefully. "I felt managed. Like every move I made had already been accounted for." Chuck nodded once. "That's the goal." Jason let out a short breath and smiled, not confidently this time, but honestly. "I've spent years learning how to look dangerous." Jason admitted. "You spent years learning how to be dangerous." The room reacted quietly, not with noise, but with understanding. Jason looked around at the crew. "I thought training was about pushing harder, moving faster, hitting stronger." He turned back to Chuck. "You showed me it's about restraint." Chuck replied softly, "Restraint is what keeps power from becoming chaos." Jason rubbed his jaw, processing that. For a long time, Jason said, I believed confidence meant never backing down. He paused. Now I realize confidence means knowing when to step back. Chuck studied him for a moment, then spoke. Most people don't reach that point, he said. They protect their pride instead of their growth. Jason nodded. I almost did. One of the trainers finally spoke up. Jason, that took guts. Jason shook his head. No. What took guts was walking away without trying to save face. He looked at Chuck again. I challenged you without understanding what I was challenging. Chuck didn't correct him. He didn't lecture. He simply said, and now you do. Jason laughed quietly. Yeah, now I do. He extended his hand again, slower this time. Thank you, Jason said, not for humbling me, but for doing it without humiliating me. Chuck accepted the handshake. Humiliation teaches nothing, he said. Respect does. That line stayed with everyone in the room. Jason turned toward the people watching. I want to say something, he said. Everyone leaned in. If I had walked away earlier, Jason admitted, I would have told myself I was being mature. He paused, but walking away after learning. That's different. He looked at Chuck. This wasn't a loss, it was a correction. Chuck gave a slight nod. Jason continued, there's a difference between playing strong characters and understanding strength. He glanced at the cameras some crew members had finally lowered. And I just learned that difference today. The atmosphere shifted. The tension was gone. What replaced it wasn't relief, it was clarity. Jason picked up his water bottle and took a sip, then added one last thing. I don't regret speaking up, he said. But I do regret underestimating silence. Chuck smiled faintly. Silence, he said, is where experience lives. Jason let that sink in. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a real laugh this time. You know, Jason said, if this had been a movie, I would have written myself a comeback. The room smiled. But real life doesn't give you retakes. Jason added, it gives you lessons. Chuck nodded. And it gives you a choice, Chuck said, to ignore them or carry them forward. Jason set his bottle down and straightened up. I'm carrying this one, he said. The respect in his voice was undeniable now. Not forced, not performative, earned. Have you ever had a moment that changed how you define strength? Comment yes or no. Jason glanced around the room one more time. This stays between us, he said. Not because I'm embarrassed, but because it's meaningful. Chuck replied calmly, meaningful things don't need an audience. Jason smiled. That might be the best lesson of all. The two men walked toward the exit together, not as rivals, not as opponents, but as equals, connected by a shared understanding. And everyone there knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something bigger. The world finds out, and the reaction is nothing like Jason expected. Jason thought it would end there. A quiet lesson, a private moment, something meaningful that stayed inside those four walls. He was wrong. What Jason didn't realize was that silence doesn't stop curiosity, it fuels it. Someone had noticed the tension earlier, someone had seen the shift, and someone, despite Jason's words, had recorded just enough. Not the movement, not the technique. But the moment Jason stepped back, that clip didn't show a fight, it showed something rarer, restraint. By the time Jason left the gym, his phone was already buzzing. At first he ignored it, then it buzzed again, and again, a message from his manager. Did something happen with Chuck? Jason stopped walking. Another message came in. You're trending. Jason frowned. For what? A link followed. Jason opened it. The clip was short, barely 15 seconds. Chuck standing calm, Jason stepping back, no sound except murmurs in the background. The caption read, Jason Statham challenges Chuck Norris and instantly rethinks it. Jason stared at the screen. That wasn't how it felt in the room, but that's how the internet works. Context disappears. Moments get flattened. Within minutes, comments flooded in. Some were respectful, some were brutal. Active is real fighter. This is what real discipline looks like. Jason knew when to stop. Respect. Jason scrolled slowly. He expected anger. What he didn't expect was relief, because the comments weren't laughing at him. They were learning from him. Then Chuck Norris's name started trending, not for violence, for restraint. A larger clip surfaced, audio included this time. Chuck's voice was clear. Confidence doesn't need to announce itself. That line spread everywhere. Jason sat down. He knew now this wasn't about ego anymore. This was bigger. Interviews, requests poured in. Jason declined most of them. until one question caught his attention. What did you actually learn from Chuck Norris? Jason agreed to answer that one. On camera, he didn't posture. He didn't spin. He didn't protect an image. He told the truth. I learned that real strength doesn't rush. Jason said it waits, it observes, and it doesn't need to win loudly. The clip went viral, not because it was dramatic, because it was rare, someone famous admitting correction. Meanwhile, Chuck Norris responded in his own way. No interviews, no posts. Just a short written statement. Respect is the highest form of strength. Jason showed it. That sentence shifted everything. Now the story wasn't Jason vs. Chuck. It was ego vs. humility. Jason's phone rang again. This time it was Chuck. Jason answered immediately. Looks like it got out, Jason said. Chuck chuckled softly. That happens. Jason hesitated. I hope you don't think I used this. Chuck replied without pause. You didn't. The lesson spoke for itself. Jason nodded, even though Chuck couldn't see it. I won't forget that day, Jason said. You shouldn't, Chuck replied. Not because of me, but because of who you chose to be afterward. Jason went quiet. Then he said something unexpected. I think people needed to see that. Chuck agreed. They did. The internet kept reacting. Not with outrage, with reflection. People debated strength. They debated fame. They debated respect. And somehow, the loudest voices weren't mocking. They were nodding. Jason Statham didn't lose credibility that day. He gained something harder to earn. Trust. Because strength, when real, doesn't collapse under correction. It sharpens. And the world noticed. Do you think moments like this make someone more respected or less? Comment more or less. Jason closed his phone and leaned back. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about roles, training, or image. He was thinking about growth. And he knew one thing for sure. The lesson wasn't over yet. Jason explains why this moment changed how he approaches life, not just fighting. The noise eventually faded. Trends move fast. Outrage moves faster. But meaning lingers. Days after the clip stopped circulating, Jason Statham found himself thinking less about what happened in the gym and more about what happened inside him. He hadn't lost a fight. He had lost an illusion. The illusion that strength is loud, that confidence needs to dominate, that respect comes from winning. That day stripped all of that away. Jason spoke about it later, not on a big stage, not in a dramatic interview, but in a quiet conversation that felt more honest than anything he'd said before. I didn't walk away because I was afraid, Jason said. I walked away because I understood. That line didn't go viral. But it mattered more than any headline. Jason explained that for years his career rewarded intensity. The sharper the edge, the stronger the image. But real encounters don't care about image. They care about awareness, he said. And awareness changes everything. He admitted something few people in his position ever do. I confused readiness with toughness, Jason said. And I confused toughness with strength. What Chuck Norris showed him wasn't a technique. It was a mindset. Chuck never tried to dominate him, never tried to embarrass him, never tried to prove superiority. That was the point. True power doesn't need witnesses. Jason said the moment that stayed with him the most wasn't the movement, it was the pause. That split second when he realized he had been read completely. That's when I knew, Jason said, not that I was weaker, but that I had more to learn. That realization changed how he approached everything afterward. Training felt different. Listening felt more important. Silence felt heavier. Jason reached out to Chuck again, not for advice, but to say thank you. Chuck's reply was short. Growth begins when defense ends. Jason kept that line. Not as a quote, as a rule. He stopped reacting so quickly. Stopped needing to win every moment. Stopped mistaking momentum for meaning. People noticed the shift, not in his roles, in his presence. He became calmer, more grounded, less interested in proving anything, and strangely enough, that made him stronger. Jason summed it up best when he said, real strength doesn't walk into a room trying to be seen, it walks in ready to learn. That's why this moment mattered. Not because a legend humbled a star, but because a star allowed himself to be humbled. That choice changed everything. It changed how people saw Jason. It changed how people talked about Chuck. And it changed how thousands of viewers thought about strength itself. No punches thrown, no winner declared. Yet somehow, everyone learned something. If you believe real strength is about control, humility, and growth, type RESPT in the comments and subscribe for more stories like this. Jason didn't call it his biggest mistake. He called it his biggest reminder. And sometimes, that's exactly what we need.